Hi everyone. Today's text is Philippians chapter 2. And it says right here, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him. So this is kind of an interesting thought here, because it says, therefore God has highly exalted, because he obeyed, God highly exalted him. Who? Jesus. Well, this is actually been misinterpreted by Jehovah's Witnesses for one, to say that, there we go, like Jesus wasn't God, wasn't like a God equivalent to God. He was a lower being, and because he did something, because he obeyed, God therefore exalted him to become like him, like God. So he achieved his deity because of his obedience. So that's how it's often interpreted. How am I supposed to understand this? It says, therefore God has highly exalted him. This is actually particularly talking about even death on a cross. So this is talking about resurrection, of course, right? And then he raised him up, seated him on his right hand, that whole thing. So it's the resurrection he's talking about. And actually, this is very consistent with the way in which the New Testament talks about the resurrection, which is, it never says that Jesus raised himself. There's always been this interesting dependence of the Son, God the Son, Jesus, to God the Father. He obeys the Father. And when he actually dies, he lets go of his life, just like everybody else, every human being. It's really interesting, we all always think about Jesus as like, okay, he has the power, obviously he knows he's going to raise himself, and therefore when he dies, he's not really dying, he's just going, he's just kind of faking it because he's going to raise himself, because he's God. Well, actually, that's a false understanding of Jesus' humanity. It's the doctrine is Jesus is 100% God and 100% human. I don't know how that works, but you can get into the doctrine about that. But it is Jesus, when he dies and he says, into your hands I commit my spirit, he's actually losing control. He's actually dying. And once I say it, and you're like, of course, that's obvious. He's actually dying, and he's experiencing death like we would, as he lets go of his spirit into the Father's hand, and he depends on the Father to raise him. And God has indeed raised him and exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name. Right? So God does raise him from the dead. And that's actually an example. Therefore, Jesus becomes an example of faith. And that's one of the really moving things that I remember learning about. Because it's like, how is Jesus an example of faith? Because, Jesus didn't have to have faith. No, actually, Jesus had to have faith. He obeyed the Father, and he let go of his life, trusting that God the Father would raise him. So that's something that I don't think is unusual in the New Testament to speak about God. Therefore, God the Father raised him, exalted him. Okay, so there is that dependence relationship. That doesn't make Jesus a lower being, right? So there's that projection of our own weird worldly hierarchy onto the situation as well that I talked about before, right? The doctrine of Trinity is actually Jesus is in a relationship of obedience to the Father, but that doesn't make him into any kind of lower being. That's just our wrong and twisted worldview being projected onto the Trinity. It says, therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So this whole idea of working out your salvation, the idea is that God has given us an identity, and this identity is such a glorious and heavy identity. Therefore, we work that out with fear and trembling. The example that I sometimes give is something like some beggar kid being adopted into a Horatio family, and he finds out, oh my gosh, I am actually in the line of the British Navy's greatest, and how do I live up to that? To work that out, you got to work that out with fear and trembling. You have to stop stealing, and you have to stop acting like a person on the street that needs to actually kind of still scrounge for food and things like that. So work it out with fear and trembling. Lastly, Timothy, right? No, Timothy's proven worth, right? So who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare, for they will all seek their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy's proven worth. So we all want to be this person, someone who's a go-to guy, who has a proven worth. How as a son with the Father he has served with the gospel. But what is the credential that he has to make him a proven person, person of proven worth? Well, it's not talents, it's not gifting. We actually have very little idea of what Timothy's gifting is. But his credential is actually spelled out here. Who's genuinely concerned. He genuinely loves people and cares for people. And he has a track record. How as a son with a father, he has served with me in the gospel. So it's like a kind of a longevity of faithfulness, longevity of faithful service. And I think we can all do that, right? We can genuinely try to have care for other people. And we can do it for the long haul. This has nothing to do with gifting or talents. And I think that's good news, that we can actually become this person of proven worth by hanging on and keep loving people and hanging on and being faithful. All right, so those are my thoughts. Okay, see you later. Bye.